All right, so I just wanted to give a short account of my experiences at Ignition Festival. So Ignition Festival is a week-long festival held in rural New Zealand between Te Araha and Matamata on the side of the Kaimai mountain ranges. There's a beautiful river running down the side of it and some forest at the back and some very large paddocks for about 1,000, maybe 1,200 people gathering for this particular festival. It's a non-commercial festival, so I wasn't able to actually read hands whilst I was there in a kind of professional capacity. So I chose instead to just give lots of workshops. So I gave 4 workshops over the course of the week, which was a great way to start the day. The crew that go to Ignition are quite a scientific type of people. So it was interesting that on the first day I spent a lot of time actually providing some of the outline of the basis for the scientific basis for hand reading, particularly attending to the skepticism that people have about it, particularly to do with the lines of the hand when they argue, oh, well, the lines are just creases, they're just folds in the skin. And it's always good to go down that particular route and talk about simian lines and the incidence of simian lines in the normal population versus the simian lines that occur in the hands of people with Down syndrome. And also to talk about the embryogenesis of the lines and how the lines form in the hands of the fetus during gestation, about the 9th to 12th week of gestation, which is about 10 weeks before the hand has any muscles and has any capability of actually moving at all. So it's not so much that the lines form where the hands fold, it's that the hand folds where the lines already are. Anyway, that was a kind of interesting digression from what I intended to talk about on the first day, which is about fingerprints. So we ended up talking about on the second day. And I got about 20 people each day to the workshops, which was a good number, and it's a good number to have in an environment where you want to have a variety of experiences. So, of course, there's the usual array of whirls and arches and loops in that particular group. There was one person with a tented arch, a couple of little double loops on their thumbs, which is where you expect to see double loops. Some 5 or 6 people with radial loops on their index fingers. So that was a particularly pertinent conversation for those people. And an array of whirls in different locations, which are always interesting to articulate to their owners the significance of having whirl on the fire finger or the air finger or the index finger. So that was a very satisfactory kind of talk, and there was actually quite a different array of palmar patterns as well. I'll just show you one that I came across, which I think is really potent. It is this rather wonderful whirl in the water quadrant area of the hand, which of course isn't seen very commonly. It's only found on about 1% of hands normally, but that's a particularly fine example in the hand of a woman who was extremely bright and picking up really quickly. And while we're on the subject of that, I actually did a couple of hand readings. I think I did 3 readings altogether. One was a person who was a film producer, and he had fire skin texture and a long ring finger with a whirl on it. And when you've got a hand with just 2 whirls on the ring fingers and lots of loops, you've got a team player, but with someone who puts a lot of emphasis upon creativity. And they were very interested to hear me give them a sort of 15-20 minute assessment of their hands, basically just looking at the skin texture and the fingerprint patterns on their own. And similarly for, let's see if we can go along to the next one. Similarly for this person whose handprints I took as well, and you can see has a very clear looper sensitivity in her hands. This is a therapist who uses her sensitivity in the work that she does, because she's dealing a lot with emotional trauma and emotional and sexual issues. So this is someone who's very passionate about her work and loves what she does and takes it very seriously. But obviously the sensitivity that she has can be brought to bear in the sort of counselling and therapeutic work that she's actually doing. Interestingly, she had a couple of whirls on her index finger, on her fingers on the one hand, but she had arches, if I can get across to that one. She had arches on the other hand, which is again very unusual to see arches on the same hand as people who've got whorls on the other arches on the other hand. So that was the second day was on fingerprints. The third day we talked about lines, and when I talk about lines, I just generally talk about in a conversation like that, just generally talk about the three main lines, which are yes, the earth line, the air line, and the water line. Just about every hand that you encounter will have those three lines. And if you're not sure about what I'm referring to there, there's a video in the tutorial section, which has got about the three main lines, so you can go and have a look at that. But in a workshop like this, I tend to focus just on some very simple observations about the lines, like is the major earth line, does it have integrity around the ball of the thumb, or is it broken? With the major air line, obviously the length and direction of the line is important. And it's good to talk about that. But considering also the start of the air and earth line, is it joined to the earth line or is it separate from the earth line? And it's quite a usual distribution. So I think there were 22 people in the workshop that day, and of those 22 people, 2 people had separated air and earth lines, which was about 10% of people. And I always say it's about 10 or 15% of people have a separated air and earth line. And it's very interesting when you have a hand feature like that and you're talking about it with the person who's got it, and they basically the recognition of their childhood experience comes through, and it dawns on them that it's just that's a unique part of their experience, and they know what's happened to them, and they know how their childhood went. And this particular case, one woman just turned to the other one. She said, "Is that how you experienced it as well?" And the other woman had tears on her face and said, yes, that's exactly what my life was like as well. And there's a moment of recognition and a solidarity that occurs in a moment like that when the other people can see that they didn't have those experiences, and those 2 people who had the difficulties of their family, the difficulties of their upbringing, such as they did, and the recognition that comes from that obviously is a very profound experience and self-encounter for those people. The airline's always good too. So a nice array of straight airlines. So there was one guy who had a Simian line formation in his passive hand, and a very drooping airline in the active hand. And it was an interesting conversation with him. He was quite reserved and sitting at the back. He had radial loops, I think, as well on his index fingers. So I talked a lot with him about the need that he had for space to kind of have spent time on his own, and how he'd been fighting his demons. He was about 50. And how he'd been fighting his demons and felt the intensity within him that caused him a lot of conflict when he was a young man. He'd been working very hard to kind of channel that and get control over that and not be overwhelmed by his emotions. And in fact, that's exactly what he did. And of course, spending time on your own is one thing, where you can do that. But the second way you can do that, of course, is through meditation. And so he articulated that exactly, that he spent a lot of time walking in the hills, walking in the mountains, meditating in nature, meditating under waterfalls and so on and so forth. And he's got a deeply introspective mind, and that's reflected by the curved airline going down into the water zone on his active hand. And that was how that was for him to hear me describing how his life had gone in the last 20, 30 years as he was wrestling with his own inner demons and managing the forces within him, was, I think, quite a revelation for him. So anyway, he wants me to come and visit him down in Wellington and do a hand reading with him. So I'm sure that's going to happen fairly soon. So there's a joy in these kind of spaces when you have a workshop format when you can provide insights to people, and there's a kind of sharing and an acknowledgement and a recognition that goes on in those spaces, which is incredibly valuable. One woman just learned something about her fingerprint pattern, on her ring fingers, and didn't come to any other workshops. And that was when I saw her a few days later, and she said, "Oh, that was so great. So I learned so much about myself. It was really helpful." So even sometimes something as very small as just the significance of one particular fingerprint pattern can be sufficient revelation for people. So on the third day, I talked about oh no, the third day was the fingerprints. Sorry, the third day was the lines. Fourth day was talking about the fingers and the thumbs. Um, and that was quite interesting because we were talking about thumbs, about how you control your life and whether you're in charge of your life or whether you just let things happen to circumstance. And we were probably 45 minutes into this conversation, and three or four people came and sat down and joined in. And I went over to check their thumbs, having already checked everybody else's thumbs, and they all had wibbly wobbly lower phalanges of the thumbs, like completely disjointed thumbs down here, completely loose. And it was just hilarious because, of course, that's indication of people who go with the flow and aren't really bothered about time, and everything's very happenstance and coincidental and serendipitous, and they don't have a particular plan and they don't stick to timetables. And we were just talking exactly about that, and then three examples just wandered into the workshop, um, exemplifying precisely the quality of somebody with a disjointed lower phalange of the thumb. So there's lovely when there's moments like that when you're reading hands in a group setting like that. And we talked about the fingers. We had some rebellious people with bent middle fingers. We had some guilty people with bent ring fingers, and uh, parents, people with issues with their parents, with problems with their index fingers, and then quite a few women with short, low set air fingers and difficulties and boundaries and difficulties in communication, difficulty articulating their needs and with their sexual partners. So a good array of kind of different psychological factors that can be seen from the fingers and thumbs as we went through what was available within that group. And of course, everyone's dealing with fingers and looking and comparing their own to someone else's. So it's a very dynamic space, and people learn a lot about themselves, and they learn a lot about hand reading. And actually, as a result of that, quite a lot of people have signed up to do courses with me. So it looks like I'm going to be um, starting a course in the Kalangaki Gorge. This festival is just an hour down the road from me, so it's my local festival, and so there's quite a few people around here who actually wanted to take it further. So I've got the names and addresses, and we're gonna get together and have some sessions with that. And particularly the woman with the whirl in the water quadrant. She's particularly fascinated by all this, and I think she's going to make a great student. So obviously, someone with a whirl in that part of the hand has got a kind of intense fascination and a mental alacrity that's going to facilitate an ease of learning this kind of material. So um, we shall see what unfolds. Um, so yeah, so not a lot of hand readings in detail with particular individuals, but a lot of hand encounters. And um, it's always productive to be in a space like that, and always good to be in give the opportunity to give people advice and make some suggestions that will make some significant differences to their lives, and inspire people to maybe look into it a little bit more deeply. So that was a good week. So next festival is the Shiva Shakti Festival, which is in February. They'll be reading hands at that one, so there'll be lots of anecdotal stories to talk about in that particular festival. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe, and more videos will be coming your way. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the history of the Ecological Society and various people that I've encountered on this journey of hand reading since 1983. So stay tuned, and I'll see you again soon.